time for many of us. And the word suffering is one that you might often hear in a congregational setting, but it may not always resonate with you. And we have a wonderful guest speaker that's going to share perspectives on not only what happens with suffering when it's here and present, but what will we do when the suffering ends? Even when the audio does not work in the sanctuary and the minister can't speak without tearing up, this too shall pass. We invite the Reverend Dr. John Gilmore to join us today to share his wisdom and perspective on looking forward. Reverend Dr. Gilmore is a former intern minister at this congregation under Reverend Bob Throne. He's a retired UU minister. He's an energy worker and a justice advocate. He's working on bringing practical spirituality to people, practical spirituality that helps give people the resources to build resilience, to find healing from trauma, from racial injustice. He's a massage therapist. He's a jack of all trades, and we are honored to have him with us today. So I want to invite Reverend Dr. John Gilmore to the front, and he's going to share with us our words of inspiration today. Reverend Dr. Gilmore. We can applaud here in the sanctuary if you like. So you don't need this because it's not working. So you can just stand here. And you'll see some folks here on the screen. And you'll be speaking to us here and us here in the sanctuary.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome during this beautiful yet strange day. But yet again, sometimes the strangeness is where we can find the beauty if we really learn how to look for it. Today, I was thinking of a little post I saw on Facebook. I actually spend too much time on Facebook. Facebook reminds me of going out on a cruise ship and it getting hit by an iceberg and you're sinking. And the big cactus that you saw in the dining room is the only thing near you floating. But so you have to decide, do I want to hug the cactus in order to live, or do I just want to drown? That's what it's like with Facebook sometimes. Cling to the cactus. But it has good things on it also. There was this little picture of this dog that they were rescuing, and the dog was in a cage. They said this dog has been in its cage all of its life and has been used for breeding purposes and experiments. We're going to let the dog out. We rescued it. So they were in this room, they opened the door, then they backed off so the dog wouldn't be afraid to come out. And the dog stuck his head out the door. Then he went back in, he slowly took his paw and he pulled the door back closed and went to sleep. And I was thinking, boy, that is such a reminder of what happens in our society with a lot of people, and especially on the larger collective level. We are like a group of people who have been sort of abused, sort of used, sort of told that we were useless and worthless, that all we could work for is to keep a strong consumer society going. We've been rewarded not because of how we are, but because of what we can produce, just like that dog, to the point where the dog was probably afraid to come out, where he found comfort in this little cage that he had been in for so long. Our cages are not like that, though, you see, because many of our cages, especially in places that are more prosperous, are more in our minds than physical cages. We create thoughts, we create ideas, we create ways of being as we're growing up, and we socialize, and we try to create these things to protect ourselves. First of all, we create them due to the instructions we receive. We get thoughts and ideas from religions, church, schools, our parents, so that we can find out how to live and survive and work in this world. And later on, we work very hard to find our own path, to find our own personality, to find a way that we can live in all of this craziness and be in comfort. The problem is sometimes, though, that we go too far with that and we begin to believe that the only way to live, the only way to find comfort is to stay in that little cage that we have created. And instead of opening the door and letting us out, sometimes society will strengthen the bars, tighten the door. If we're looking successful, if we're looking the way we're supposed to look, if we're doing something great, if we're a workaholic, if we're working ourselves to death, instead of telling us to slow down, to look inside and to find rest, society often pushes us because that's supposed to be something good. Even so, during those times, this door is always opening if we take time to notice it. And in the pain and in the suffering, during those times when we are most shaken up, comes the time for awakening and comes the time for freedom. And this right now, these horrible times are somewhat like the concept of Kali Yuga, when things get so bad that collective people have to wake up and see the truth. We are going through those times right now. But even in those times, we can find peace. We can find rest. But it's not by going back in the door, by pulling the door closed. It's by leaving the door open, by standing in the doorway, in the winds of adversity, as the Shaolin say, without flinching. It doesn't mean getting out of your comfort zone. It doesn't mean dumping the way you have learned to survive and live in the world. No, it means having the door open to other ways, to invite reality into our little world until our world expands and we realize that we are much greater than we think. We realize that we are not the thoughts, the ideas, and the feelings that we have been picking up all of our lives in the society, but we are much greater creative beings, and we are able to shift, to adapt, to change as necessary. All of our lives, we have learned that we are part of this idea, this ego identity, and we work to support that identity. We fight wars, we kill, the massacres, all of the troubles within the world come from this idea of who we are. And when somebody threatens that, instead of opening the door, we fight like crazy to defend the false idea of ourselves. Truth is, in reality, however, our minds are always shifting, our minds are always changing, and we are becoming something new each and every day. And the more open we are to that, the more we learn to prosper, no matter where we are. We keep the door open, we go in when we need to find comfort. We come outside of ourselves when we need to expand, when we need to grow. And when we need to know love as a reality instead of a word or instead of a concept. We find ourselves suffering, but the doors continue to open. I'm reminded of something that I learned a long time ago. I went to this school called the University of Creation Spirituality. And I remember sitting in a class with a person named Stuart Cohen and Brian Swim. They were these cosmologists who do a lot of study of the universe. And they said something to me that most of us probably never think about. They said, when someone asks a question about whether the universe has consciousness or can think or has feelings, that question is not very important, because as soon as we realize that we are part of the universe and we're asking a question, we realize that the universe has every type of concept and idea that we have. They said the damage comes not by trying to define ourselves as human beings, but by thinking that we are separate from everything else. And if we really begin to look at our ideas of separation and how we've been living and thinking about that, we can see that most of our suffering actually comes from separation. When we begin to realize that we are all part of one thing and we are connected, our viewpoint changes. One way my viewpoint changed was we were just moving from Manchester, New Hampshire, down to Lowell. And I remember we had these two cats we took with us. One of the cats somehow found a way to get out of the house and ran away. The other cat was there and it was very depressed. It was moping around the house. And this was a very fun-loving, playful cat. And I had read this book by Howard Thurman about a person whose grandmother had been a Native American in California. He had said that she was able to communicate with animals. And she said that most of them, Native Americans, could do that. And I was like, that's very interesting, you know? And I was doing a lot of meditating at the time. This was for 3 or 4 years ahead of this move, I heard that. So he basically said that what they did was, if you meditated, got into a nice calm state, and you could visualize something in your mind, you could send that visualization to the animal, and it would send you something back if your mind was open. So I was like, huh. I mean, I was super steeped in psychology, social science, and all of that, so I barely believed anything that I heard. But I said, well, I left the door open on that, and I kept reading and studying and things like that. So that day I said, well, let me try this. So the cat was moping around, and I went to the cat and I sent this message about wondering about him moping around and everything. And I actually got this image back. I can only tell you the words that I got from the image because I can't remember the exact images. The first one was the cat wanted to know, and I know this sounds crazy, but this is a door opening for you. The cat wanted to know why we had to leave. And I tried my best to send an image about us moving out and not being able to stay in the house anymore. And it looked like the cat understood me. It was very strange, first of all, because as soon as I sent this message, and you can do this at home yourself if you have a pet, you'll notice there's this intensity, and this animal will look right into your eyes, which is not normal, as if it's struggling to do something. So then what happened was, then I had put a cat door in the doorway. So the cat asked me, then I asked the cat, well, why aren't you using the cat door? Now, in our other neighborhood, we had a window that the cat used to go in and out of, but all these wild animals used to come in. So the cat would have to fight these wild animals all the time. So the cat said that it thought that we put the door in there so that we wouldn't have to let it in and out anymore ourselves because we didn't care about it anymore. And I sent this message, well, we put the door in there so that you can go in and out whenever you want to. Then the cat, I know this sounds insane. Then the cat was like, well, I can't see when I go out there. There might be something looking for me. And I told the cat, well, what I'll do is I'll look around and make sure it's clear. And then you can use the cat door. So the first time I go out, I open the door, I look out, and then I close it, the cat goes out the door. This happened a few times. Then my wife, Fran, gets home. The cat's running around playing and dancing around the living room, right? She says, well, what happened to the cat? He was so depressed. And I told her the story about talking with the cat. And she received it better than I did. You know, she was like, wow. And sometimes we go out to dinner and she'd tell people about this. I'd be like, oh my God, don't tell them that. I'd be so embarrassed, you know. But it really worked. And I've done that since then. And then since then, I have actually gone and read books and seen things on YouTube and the internet. There are actually people traveling around the world teaching workshops on animal communication who are getting these messages like people's names, animals' experiences in the past, and all of that. You know, it is like totally out of the world. But these are the capabilities that we have as human beings. That's why I'm talking about these stories. We have the power to overcome so many things, but we have been sort of trapped in little cages and little boxes, so we don't leave the door open in order to understand what's going on. When we do that, we begin to understand that we are not separate from nature. We are not separate from the universe. We are part of that original mind that the Buddhists talk about, that thing that is beyond creation, that created everything. And we are part of it, moving in it, breathing in it, and we can actually be a channel for it on this earth. And when we realize who and what we are, everything that happens, all of the things that we think of for suffering is a channel for opening the doors to let more of that love in and let more of that love flow out of us. We are very powerful and important beings, but we have learned to close ourselves in little boxes and to close ourselves in little cages. And that is what suffering really comes from. Aristotle spoke about the good. Aristotle's view was that the good is that at which all things aim. Just as an acorn is planted, it grows into a mature tree that brings forth fruit, and it enters into its fullness and maturity. He said, that is what is the good. Even as it is for that acorn, that is the good for each and every one of us, to be rooted and planted, to grow, to become all we can be as we mature, to become part of this big system. And when that's thwarted, many people say that is what is known as evil. Evil is stopping the natural progress of the evolution, not only of the human being, but the human family. And this is the evil that we are seeing nowadays confronting us, as people are actually stopping the evolutionary process of the human being, stopping the evolutionary process of our country and each and every individual by teaching us things that are not correct and limiting. How can we stand up against this evil? By taking away the shade that covers us and letting our pure, true wisdom and beauty shine. Every one of us is somewhat like a beautiful diamond with all of the many facets, shining back and reflecting the love and the beauty at the core of the universe, that thing that changes darkness and pain into life. That code that we find in the seed that's planted in the earth that somehow works together to create life, a living tree out of dirt and elements and minerals. That is what is at the core of all of us, and all of the personalities that we have shaped and we have created is a splendor, persona. We all have to learn to accept these selves, and more importantly, to let them out instead of hiding them all the time. It's time for the people of love and beauty to come out of the shadows and to stop the pain and the anger, and to stop those who are violent from taking all the light and swallowing up all the warmth, taking more than they deserve. And this is something that all of us can do as long as we remember that we are one. So we open the door, leave the door open. Stand in the winds of adversity without fear. And then one day we realize that these are not the winds of adversity. These are the winds of change, which is the only constant thing that exist within this universe, the winds of change and of growth. And we are its conduits. There's a quote by Buddha that is most often understood incorrectly. People say that the Buddha says there will always be suffering. What the Buddha said was, for the unawakened, there will always be suffering. It is time then for us to become awake and turn that suffering into life. Into life. Namaste, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have some special music to meditate on these words from Tina Turner.